Hi, today's video is about something that's rare and cool and interesting, and probably something that most people have never seen. Today at the shop we have a NuTone SM428 Stereo Master Station. And the SM428, SM stands for Stereo Master, and 428, I don't know why it's a 428, couldn't find any information about why they decided to call it that. The SM428 was introduced, it's a late 70s model. It came out either at the end of 1976 or the beginning of 1977, and it was in production through the end of 1985. I've always looked at it as it's the quintessential 80s NuTone Intercom system. It incorporates a lot of interesting features, and it's an interesting design that no other model really shares. Well, it shares some things, but not a lot of it. But we'll get into that more later on. The SM428 was the fourth and last stereo system that NuTone ever made. The original was the model 2400, and it was replaced by the model 2071, which was then replaced by the model 2500, and then finally the 2500 was replaced with the SM428. The basic design of the 428 is somewhat different than other models because its underlying design shares a lot of design aspects with the NuTone IMA406, which came out around the same time. And we'll go over some of that as we go along. But let's take a look at what we have with the 428 Master Station, and then we're going to take a quick look at the catalog that came with it. These are very rare, and because of the way they're designed and because of their rarity, I don't actually have a lot of other equipment that goes along with this. So we don't see these very often. We get in maybe 4 or 5 of them a year. They were fairly expensive compared to other models, and like most stereo music intercom systems, the number of them that were sold was probably rather low in comparison to all the other models that they made, because the reality for stereo music intercom systems are you would have, in most houses, you would have maybe 2 or 3 rooms that had stereo speakers, but most people didn't put stereo speakers in normal sized bedrooms. There you would have mono speakers. So the additional cost for a stereo master station to have 2 or 3 pairs of stereo speakers, maybe in the family room, the living room, and the dining room or something like that, was rather high if you spread the additional cost over just the 3 extra stations. And I think that had a lot to do with the lower sales numbers. You know, most people probably liked it, but they thought, no, we don't really want to spend that on that, so we'll buy the next one down, which would have been the 406. So I think that has something to do with it. Like all NuTone stereo master stations, this would be considered a receiver. It's not truly a master station in the sense that it has no built-in speakers, it has no intercom controls, so therefore it's technically more of a receiver than it is a master station. However, it does have the electronics in it that allow the intercom functions to operate from remote stations. So when this would have been installed, usually in a family room or something like that, you would have had some wall speakers connected to this, and I'll show you that when we look at the catalog. But let's look at what we have here on the SM428. So on the front of the unit, it's turned on now. This is a unit that was sent in for repair, and I've gone through it and repaired it all. It had a fairly substantial failure that happened over time. This particular one I think is from 1978. So here on the front of the unit we have 10 room control switches, and the SM428 was designed to handle up to 10 pairs of stereo speakers, and you could actually have 10 pairs of 8-inch stereo stations, and that's quite a lot for the average size house. I'm not sure how many houses had that. Most of the time, like I said, you would have a mix of stereo speakers in some rooms and mono speakers in other rooms. So you have your 10 room control switches, and they have the same settings as all NuTone room control switches have from that time period. You can turn the knob to off, and that turns that room off completely. You can turn it to radio and intercom, so you have both music and voice. You have standby. Standby is an old-fashioned labeling that goes all the way back to the 60s. Standby is basically intercom only. That standby was first used in the N25, 61, 62 systems, and it really means that you've turned the radio off in that room and you just have intercom functions. And then lastly, you have listen in, which is basically a monitor position. The room that's set in the listen in mode, those speakers will pick up sounds in that room and you'll hear them come out the other speakers on the system. So it will handle up to 10 pairs of stereo speakers or a combination of stereo and mono speakers. Here you have your selector switch, and we have AM, FM, tape, phonograph, and auxiliary. And when this was new, NuTone did make an in-wall fold-down cassette player. Of course, they made an in-wall fold-down phonograph, and then you had an auxiliary connection that you could connect to some other music source in your house. I suppose a television, or it was before CD players, so it wouldn't have been that. So I'm not sure exactly how the auxiliary might have been used. If you had radio, tape, and phonograph, I don't know, maybe you would have a cassette player and an 8-track player and be really living that 80s lifestyle. So that's your selector switch here, and it's just a rotary knob. It just moves from position to position. Sorry, that's the radio. Down here you have a true on-off switch, so if we switch it off, you actually turn the unit off completely. There is no standby mode per se. Off is off, on is on. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why these models last as long as they do, is they spend a lot of their time in the off position. Here we have separate treble and bass controls, and these are dual sliding faders. Because it's a stereo system, there's, if I take the, well, I'll show you on a board. I don't want to take the knobs off the customer's unit. So you have bass for right and left, treble for right and left, and volume to all speakers, which would set the music level throughout the house, and then you can fine tune it with the volume controls on each station. And also, because it's stereo, you have a balance control for left and right, so you can balance the sound out based on where the speakers are placed. You have a standard NuTone analog meaning mechanical, tuner assembly here, and you simply turn the knob and it moves the pointer, and you have the AM scale on the top and the FM scale on the bottom. This is very much like an IMA 406, and it has 3 lights behind the diffuser, so it glows nicely. Here we have a tuning accuracy meter. This was a very popular type of thing in the 70s and early 80s for home audio, home receivers, home stereos, and basically it's a tuning indicator. So let's go ahead, I'm going to turn the volume down and we're going to put it on FM, and well, I'll show you that in a second. Here we have a stereo and mono switch, and since it is a stereo system, you do have right channel output and left channel output. It has 2 separate amplifiers. And if you're listening to a stereo FM broadcast, you can leave it in the stereo position and get stereo separation between the 2 channels. And when you're receiving in stereo, it has a stereo FM indicator here, the little green diffuser. There's a light behind that. And the stronger the stereo reception is, the brighter the green light glows, which is kind of cool. If you're listening to an FM stereo broadcast and the reception is a little on the marginal side, and you know how FM gets kind of staticky in those kind of situations, you can flip it up to mono, which will combine the 2 right and left channels into a single channel and send them out to each station, and that helps cut down on the background noise on weaker FM stations. The other thing about this system is, if you have rooms with monaural speakers, 1 speaker in each room, say a child's bedroom or a laundry room or something like that, that station, if you leave the master in stereo, you're only receiving the A channel through the single mono speaker in the laundry room. The thing you have to understand about stereo, you have 2 channels, right and left, and some frequencies play more in the right channel than they do in the left channel. So you may have mid-range and highs in the right channel, and you might have mid-range and low in the left channel. So if you turn one channel off, if we turn the left channel off and it goes away, you're missing all of the lows, the basses in the music, and that makes the music sound odd. It's like, the way I always describe it is, you're missing half of the music. So if you're listening to it on monaural speakers, you would leave the switch in the mono position, and that will combine the right and left channel outputs of the amplifiers into the single A channel, and you're getting the whole frequency range in those speakers. It's a little odd that way in how it functions, because if you think about it, you've spent a lot of money for a stereo receiver and you have stereo speakers through your house, but lots of the time, you know, if you're in the laundry room folding laundry, or if you're in the garage and you only have a single speaker, you've paid a lot of money for the extra technology, but you're not really using it. But that's the compromise on a design like this. And the reason they did that is, I'm pretty sure they were confident that most people weren't going to be putting pairs of stereo speakers in your standard 12 by 14 kid's bedroom, or in the laundry room. So you have to accommodate, you know, the potential sales and the lesser price of an entire system cost by being able to use mono speakers. But that's what that's for. Let's go ahead and look at the tuning meter, because the tuning meter is actually one of the kind of cool things on the system. So we're zoomed in on the tuning accuracy meter, and you can see it has a scale of 0 to 8. And if we switch the unit to, I have the volume turned down, if we switch it to FM, you can see how it jumped up. Right now it's a little more than 2, not quite 3. And as I tune stations in, if I move between stations, it will drop. And if you find a stronger station, there we have almost 4. And you can see here the FM stereo indicator light has come on. Reception here at the shop lately, this time of year, is pretty poor. And I do have this hooked up to just a standard NuTone dipole antenna. We don't cheat here at the shop and have some kind of really fancy whiz-bang FM antenna that pulls in every station perfectly, because that's not really what people have at their house. So we suffer along with reception issues just like everybody else does. Again, if you just turn it, you'll find points where it goes up. There again, almost 4, and then it drops down. It never seems to go all the way to 0 unless you get perhaps in a point where there's no FM reception at all. There is another almost 4. I don't really expect it to be much more than 4. There's a pretty good station. That's almost 4. And what you can do, the point of this is, of the needle is, since this is an analog tuner, and as you play with the knob and move the tuning condenser inside the unit, you can sort of hone in on the perfect spot. Of course, you would also judge how well it sounds as you do that. I have it turned down right now because we don't want to get a copyright restriction from YouTube. If you switch it from stereo to mono, it still receives in FM stereo, but it's being mixed inside the unit into a single channel. So it doesn't really, the stereo mono switch doesn't really affect the tuning at all. The other thing about the SM428 is it's encased in this really nice walnut wooden box. It's almost entirely a surface mounted unit. It does have a wall housing. It would be an IR14, and it's a specific wall housing for this unit, but it has this really nicely made oak case. The corners are mitered and they have little dowels to help hold them together. These look really nice, especially when they're cleaned up. This one, the fellow that owns it, it's obviously has been varathaned or varnished over time. It's a little bit shinier than average. A really good thing you can do with these, like most wood in a house, I'm not sure what kind of finish was put on the wood cabinets when they were made, but over time they start to get a little dried out looking, and they don't look nearly as nice as they did when they were new. And I can let me show you what we do with them sometimes when they come in to help sort of spruce them up a little bit. The way we clean up the wooden cabinets, and we are very conservative about what we do, if they have paint and stuff on them, you can usually it's latex paint, and you can sort of carefully remove it without damaging the finish. But if they look kind of dull and dried out and tired looking, what I do is I use this. This is Howard's Restore Finish, and it's not meant to strip finishes off of furniture and wood finished items. It's to help renew them. It says restores color to faded wood finishes, blends out scratches and blemishes, remove white heat rings. They show it here with a rag. Sometimes if there's like little latex paint spatters on it, I'll use some 000 steel wool, and you steel wool it in the direction of the grain, and you sort of work this in, and it will clean off the paint, and it will darken up the wood just a little bit back to its original finish. I use the walnut. This comes in different colors for different kinds of wood, and I use the walnut because that's most appropriate for the things that NuTone has made. And you do this, and you go over it carefully, and then you let it dry. And when you get done with this, then you use this. This is Howard Feed and Wax Wood Polish and Conditioner, Beeswax and Orange Oil. And I suppose it has beeswax and orange oil, but this is just sort of a light protective coating. It's sort of a gelatin, kind of a lot like melted honey. Anyway, you put this on a rag and you carefully wipe it on, always in the direction of the grain of the wood, and then you let it dry and you buff it off, and you get a nice little medium sheen on it without it being too glossy, and it brings the color back into the wood, and it's a really inexpensive way to sort of spruce it all up and make it look like somebody cares about it. So that's what we do to help clean it up a little bit. Let's take a quick look at the catalog, and I'll show you some of the things that were available for this system, and then I'll let you hear what it sounds like, and then I'll show you what's on the back. So these are pages out of the 1985 NuTone Intercom catalog, and we have this very 1980s looking gal here. She's holding a record. It's Wes Montgomery, California Dreamin'. I'll have to see what to stream that sometimes and see what kind of music that is. But she's standing here next to her fairly well done SM428. She's got the faux finish wall thing going on. And of course it's the 80s, so she's got a fern over here in a macrame hanger because she's living a very stylish lifestyle. So what you see here in the picture is you have the SM428 Master Station, you have the fold down record changer here, which is an RC91-3, and I think the RC91, the record player mechanism, was made by BSR, but I'm not absolutely positive about that. They use different manufacturers for the record player mechanism over the years. And then in the wall on either side of the SM428, she has a pair of stereo speakers, and these are special speakers. These are model SS40s, and SS40s are a better quality, high fidelity pair of music only speakers that would be connected up to the SM428. Now, if you wanted to make this into a music and intercom station, you would have to place a small little wall remote control on the wall in the mix here somewhere to have intercom functions through the speakers also. The thing that made the SS40 speakers special are they use special high fidelity 8 ohm speaker cones. All of the other speakers on the SM428 are 25 ohm cones like all other NuTone systems of the day, but you were allowed to use only one pair of SS40s on an SM428, because if you had multiple pairs of these speakers, it drags the impedance down, overloads the amplifier, and you would have problems over time. So these are also, they're walnut boxes. It says it's a pecan finish while the master is a walnut finish, but I have a feeling they probably would have matched pretty well. And then they have sort of that late 70s, you can't really see it in the picture, these are foam sort of foam sculptured grills that popped into the front of it to cover up the speaker cone. It's that type, if you ever bought speakers in the 70s with the foam grills, you know what happens to them over time. The foam loses its life and it begins to crumble and disintegrate and fall apart. It was probably 15 or 20 years ago. I had a customer with these and the grills had fallen apart, and I actually contacted NuTone and they had one pair left of replacement foam grills, which we got for the customer. And even though they were new old stock and they had been sitting in their original parts boxes for decades, they were still already starting to fall apart. So that's the way it was. You can also, if the foam grills are falling apart, you can make some thin wooden frames that fit inside the box and then cover them with speaker cloth. Speaker cloth is a little different than regular cloth because it's acoustically transparent, so it doesn't affect the sound coming out of the speakers. What it says in the brochure is NuTone SM428 Musicom, because it's music and intercom, is unique. It offers built-in stereo plus intercom! If you want a stereo sound but hate clutter, the NuTone SM428 Musicom is for you. It gets your stereo off the floor and into the walls. Because it's built-in, it completely eliminates the messy tangle of wires to components and the clutter of multiple units set about your home. And then it goes on and on about all the values and virtues of it. SM428s are an 8-wire system. It would be NuTone IW8, which is the same as NuTone IW6 with an additional pair, and the additional pair are blue and blue with a white stripe. You could also get the built-in cassette player recorder, which is a model CP82. And when you get down to the technical specifications, without going over everything in great detail, I think I'll take a shot of it and include it so you can see it in the video. The important bit is it says 12 watts continuous average power, 6 watts per channel RMS, 100 Hertz to 20,000 Hertz at less than, wait for it, 10% total harmonic distortion, 10 speaker load equals 2.5 ohms of impedance. And then you get into the tuner sensitivity and so on and so on and so on. And I'll take a picture of that and post it in the video so you can see all the specifications. Now you might be thinking, well, 12 watts continuous average power, that's an honest rating, and it is 6 watts per channel. And of course you're probably thinking, well, 6 watts per channel, my iPhone is better than that. But what you have to sort of compare it to is that the next nearest model to this for power would be the IMA 406, and an IMA 406 has a 1.5 watt amplifier. So you're talking about 4 times the power in a system like this. It was a move up. So here on the next 2 pages, it shows the SM428 and it points out what some of the controls on it are for. Here it shows different pictures of the different accessories that can go with it to build a system up. And here we have our SS40 in-wall speakers. Down here we have are pairs of 8-inch inside speakers. These are model SS48CD and SS48CW. It's dark and white. These are similar speaker grills as what would be used in the IMA 406, except that the switchboard assemblies are different because they have dual volume controls for right and left channel. The left channel speaker has no controls at all. Everything is on the right speaker. Then you have 8-inch monaural speakers, which are the same. They're ISA 48s. And then you have 5-inch monaural speakers. You can have a built-in monaural alarm clock station. You can have ceiling speakers, which are ISA 78s. You have wall remote controls, which are stereo controls. So you would have one wall remote with dual volume control and intercom functions wired to a pair of ceiling or wall speakers. You have an alarm clock, a desktop alarm clock station, a desktop intercom station, and then you have a variety of outdoor controls. You have the usual arrangement of front door entry speakers, either with or without doorbell push buttons. You have a monaural patio speaker, which is an ISA 49, or if you're going big time on it, you would use an SR42, which is an outdoor stereo remote control, dual volume controls that would be wired to pairs pairs of either IS79 in-wall 8-inch speakers for outdoors, or a pair of ISA77 surface mount 8-inch outdoor speakers. So there was a lot of equipment available that you could create a fairly impressive system if you really put your mind to it. And then here on the other page, they give you some different layout arrangements that you can consider when installing your system. Here we have the SM428, and it's flanked by the 8-track player on this side and the phonograph on this side. Here we have the 3 units stacked vertically. Here we have just the SM428 with the record player, and here's the SM428 with the 8-track player. So there was a lot of different ways, and there was a lot of equipment available that would allow you to build up whatever kind of system you wanted. And here on the last page, you have what they call the system wiring representation only diagram, and it shows you fundamentally how the system would be wired. Here in the center we have our SM428, and it shows how the wiring would be run and what kind of wiring would be run to connect different remote station options. Here we have an electronic door chime which you can tie into the system. It does have a chime input. This is before the days of chime modules, so if you wanted to have a chime tie-in, you would have a separate surface mounted some type of NuTone electronic door chime that would ring in its location, and then it would be tied through the system. Also, it shows pairs of inside ceiling speakers with a stereo remote, pairs of built-in patio speakers with a stereo remote, all the different possibilities. And down here on the bottom it shows the different rough-ins for the different components and their dimensions and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very complete system. It was back in the day when NuTone offered a ton of equipment that was available, sometimes just for specific models, and sometimes that would cover all the models that they made at any given time. And it really was the best of times to be in the intercom business. And like I said, since I don't have any of the official speakers and remote stations for one of these, I don't even have a single stereo wall remote control. I thought I had at least one, and I looked everywhere, and apparently I don't. I do have some for the other models that NuTone's made, but these are hard to come by. So if anybody's got one out there, send it to me. I need it. So what I've got it hooked up here to, which you can see, is I've got the SM428 Master Station. I have it hooked up just to a pair of NuTone 25 ohm 8-inch speaker cones. This is an inside cone, and this is outdoor cone. You can see it's kind of shiny because it's been treated for outdoor use, and we're just going to listen to it on that. We're not going to get a lot of great stereo separation because they're not spaced as far apart as they really should be, but it's just for testing purposes. We've got it tuned on whatever station it's on, and we're getting almost a 4 on the tuning accuracy meter there. So let's just bump the volume up a little bit. We're on FM. And it plays nicely. We can move the balance left. That's, even though it's on the right, that's the left. They're backwards. Maybe I should fix that. Hold on. All right, so we have left, and we have right, and then we, in the center, equal volume out of both. So let's go ahead and tune it to another station. That's halfway pleasant. We can play with our bass control and our treble. I've always been a more bass, less treble kind of guy. That's pretty much what it sounds like. It's hard to relay the sound in a video like this, but when it's all hooked up and playing in someone's house, they do actually have very nice sound. The other thing I have hooked up to it is I have a monaural speaker. Pardon the blue tape. I don't know why that's actually on there. This is an ISA45, and this is a monaural speaker. That's a monaural speaker that would be shared with not only the SM428 but also with an IMA 406, and we have our standard 6-wire intercom controls. So we have inside patio talk and listen, and door speaker talk and listen, and a volume control. Let's pretend this is in the laundry room here, and if we want to listen to the radio in the laundry room and we want to have both channels play through this at the same time, so we're not just getting the right channel, what we're going to do is move our switch to mono. And now we've mixed our two channels, and we'll switch back to the radio. Let me turn some of these off. I think it's, no, this one. No, wrong one. This one. And I don't think you can hear the difference.
We do R&B the way no one
when you switch between stereo, mono, and maybe most people didn't do that. I'm not really sure, or if they even knew that you really needed to do that. But we have our intercom functions. We can talk to the front door speaker, which is over there. Sorry about the feedback. And then listen. And then inside talk, inside listen. We have to turn these on. Love the feedback. So the intercom functions correctly. It's actually a very nice sounding system. I actually have in the past hooked up a pair of 8-ohm speakers. I have a pair of 8-ohm 3-way speakers here. They're a pair of older 70s Marantz speakers here at the shop. You hook those up in place of the SS40s to the Master Station. It actually puts out some pretty decent sound. Let's take a look at what's on the back. So we're looking at the back of our SM428. It has a fairly unique design. It's not made like any other NuTone intercom ever. It's actually a pretty cool design. However, it's not terribly unique in some respects because it shares a lot of design aspects with the way a lot of 70s home stereo equipment was built at the time, and I think somebody was being trendy when they designed it. So what we have here is on the back of the unit, let's go over the boards and I'll show you one of the unique aspects of the board. There are 5 boards in this section, and going from bottom to top we have a power supply board here. So what we have here is the multiplex board. It's responsible for the stereo decoding. Here we have a 2-channel preamp board with a little portion of it for the intercom controls on this end. And then we have 2 amplifier boards, one for right channel, one for left channel. And one of the things that makes this design unique is these boards are plug-in boards. So we can take our multiplex board and carefully unplug it, and it comes out as a complete assembly. And when you plug it back in, it has these pin connectors here, and they plug into a mating socket on the main board, and that's how it's connected up. It eliminates almost all interconnect wires or cable assemblies. There's virtually no wiring in this back. There's a little bit on a couple of the boards, but it's not like other models where there's all kinds of cable looms running all over the place. So this is our multiplex board. There isn't a lot that goes wrong with these other than either age-related problems or with people who try to do things like put 8-ohm speakers everywhere in their house and they blow the thing up. These are very long-lasting designs. So that's our multiplex board. I'm not going to unplug all of them because this is a customer's unit and it's all done. I have some other boards I'll show you afterwards. Over here we have the AM/FM tuner assembly. This is the same type of tuner assembly that's used in other 70s models. The primary difference with this is a stereo tuner module. A standard tuner module is monaural for AM and FM because other systems are monaural systems, but this is a stereo tuner because it's a stereo intercom. While the components for mono or stereo are actually on all of the tuner assemblies NuTone made at this time, the stereo ones have this little 3-pin connector over here, and that's how you get the stereo out. Here we have, this is a talk listen module. This has to do with the hands-free reply for intercom operation, and this is exactly the same module that's used in an IMA 406. The intercom control circuits and the door and the talk module are the same, and that's why the basis of the intercom operation is the same as an IMA 406, and that's why you can use the speakers from an IMA 406. Up here we have the terminal board assembly, and one of the nice things about this particular design is, if you think about it, if you had a 10 stereo station installation, you would have a total of more than 80 wires connected to all of these screws. And if at some point the unit needs to be serviced, the idea of having to unwire all 80 wires to take the thing out of the wall would not be a fun project. So the way they designed it is, this board actually unplugs, and if you do it carefully, it comes away, and what you can imagine is all of your 80 wires are still connected, and this stays at the customer's house, and then when the unit's returned, it has the same pin connectors here, and it simply plugs back in. Back when I signed up to be a NuTone authorized NuTone service center, and they used to send out, they had a service center starter kit, and it was 3 giant boxes of stuff, and one of the things that came in the giant box of stuff was one of these. And this is a terminal board assembly for an SM428, because they knew that if a customer brought one of these in for repair, or if you went out and took one out of the customer's house and brought it back for repair, you would need one of these to hook speakers up to it to see what's wrong and if you got it repaired correctly. So I actually have a couple of these now. These are very handy to have, so if you send yours off, I've got one. In fact, I've actually got 2, because these are both mine. This is a newer one, this is an older one. To keep the board flat on it, this is an often overlooked and lost part. There's this little plastic spacer bar here that sits on a couple posts so the board doesn't get pushed back into the tuner assembly, and it's important to have that in place. Back here are our auxiliary input jacks, and because it's stereo, we have A channel and B channel, or right and left. These are the phono inputs, the tape inputs, and the auxiliary inputs, where you can connect all sorts of external music devices. So here we're looking at an example. These are other boards that I own. These aren't the boards from the customer's unit, so these are all dead standard original. And this is the power supply board, and basically all we've got on here are some really large Wappensides diodes to build a rectifier. These are actually 3 amp diodes, which are much larger than average for any kind of electronic system that NuTone ever made. And then you've got a bunch of filter capacitors. There's a couple diodes down, small diodes down in here, and it's a pretty basic and standard kind of board. And here we have our 2-channel preamp board with a little bit at this end for intercom circuitry to allow the intercom to operate correctly. It's a pretty basic design, and if you look at it, it's actually kind of a mirror image of each other, although it's not like this is sitting over here. It's actually this is sitting over here, and it's kind of turned. So, but they are pretty much a mirror image of each other. There isn't, again, not a lot that goes on here. A lot of capacitors, a lot of discrete small signal transistors. 2 of the important things are this little yellow thumb wheel here and this little yellow thumb wheel here. This is for intercom volume adjustment for each channel. These came preset from the factory, and generally speaking, they don't really need to be changed much. When sets come in here for repair, we don't readjust anything like this because the owner of the system is used to it being the way it is. So we just leave things alone. And then here we have one of our 2-channel amplifier boards. And again, it's a pretty basic design. Down in here, inside the big aluminum heatsink, the 2 big wings, down in here we have a little Class D amplifier IC. This is a similar design to the amplifier IC that's used in a IMA 406. However, this one has better specifications and has higher output. That's where you get the additional power for the SM428 as a system. And then all you really have on here besides that there are a bunch of filter capacitors. There's a couple diodes. There are early and late versions of the amplifier boards, and the later ones, the early ones apparently had some stability issues, and they made some component changes. There's actually a few components on here that are not they're not silk screened onto the board. You just have to know that they actually belong there. And here's just a quick look at a new piece of NuTone IWA wire. This is period appropriate. This would be from the late 80s or early 90s. IWA was used all the way through, I think it was available through the end of like 1992, then it was discontinued. Basically IW6 with an extra pair. So here we have our red pair, our orange pair, and our black pair, and there's a white stripe on one conductor for each pair so you can index them correctly, and these 6 together would make up IW6, and then for IW8 you have the blue pair, and that makes up your 8 wires. And this would be used everywhere. The SM428 is a home run system. It's not allowed to loop wire speakers. And here finally we have what NuTone calls the parent board. The parent board is the board that all of the other boards plug into, and this is probably the least seen side of any NuTone board ever. This would be the front side of the board. Here's our tuning accuracy meter here, and this is our stereo mono switch, our on-off switch, and then our treble, bass, and volume slide faders with our balance control. It's necessary to do a complete service to remove this board from the set because you have the 10 rotary switches, and they usually desperately need to be cleaned because they're sealed up in there and they get oxidized and make poor connections. Also, the fader controls become very hard to move. The fader controls are not really top quality. They're a plastic bodied control, and when they get dirty, the plastic, the grime that builds up makes the plastic kind of gummy and sticky, and they're hard to slide. These can be cleaned. These do not come apart, and they should not be removed from the board. We use the Deoxit D5 to clean them lightly, and then we use a little bit of the Deoxit F5 fader lube to help lubricate them, and if they need more than that, we use the Deoxit fader grease, and we put it in a little plastic syringe and inject it into the control, not a lot, just a little, and that helps smooth out the action and make it easier for the customer to operate. There is a lamp socket here for the FM stereo indicator. It uses an unusual bulb. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. We actually keep a few of them in stock. We have our selector switch here for our AM, FM, phono, tape, auxiliary knob that goes on there, and then these are the rotary switches for our 10 room control switches. And you might notice here that there are 2 missing, and you might wonder why that is. Well, this board, this is a donor board now, because this customer's SM428 had 2 broken switches. Here are actually one of the switches that came out of his unit. What happens to these is the knobs on the front of the faceplate, the little room control knobs that fit on the shaft, they tend to get stuck onto the switch shaft pretty severely sometimes. I would assume that when it was brand new they would easily just pull off, but after this many years they're sort of stuck in place. The knobs are plastic, but they have a metal sleeve insert that is sort of a D-shaped insert that fits on the D-shaped shaft here. They sort of get stuck in place and they're very hard to get off, and if you pull on them incorrectly, what you're doing is you're pulling up on the top half of the switch, the metal part, and you can see how it kind of wiggles and wants to pull out of the plastic half of the switch. That oftentimes results in the plastic part of the switch cracking in half, and then the switch has to be replaced. SM428s are rare enough that you just simply don't see a lot of them floating around to buy that you can scrap out for parts. If you break something, you got a real problem. So that's a brief look at a NuTone SM428. This one actually on date code on the back is 1979. It's a brief look at the ins and outs of a very special and fairly rare model that NuTone made. If you found this video interesting and maybe helpful to you, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that always helps. If you like our videos and like our YouTube channel and learn something from them, please subscribe to our video. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get email notifications when we post new videos. That's all for today. See you on the next video.